Early on in a stage of a company, what we've seen is the CEO or the CXO is often the best global sales officer, right? Because very often, and so I think another way to think about it is also what not to do, right? What to do or what mistakes not to repeat when you're trying to expand globally. One of the things you've seen is that if you're very early on, what not to do is to recruit a very high-priced salesperson in, let's say, Silicon Valley, because it's very glamorous, right? When you see a pedigree and you see a non-Indian sort of Caucasian person who's like an ex-IBM or you think can sell. It takes, research has shown, I'm sure there's research, it takes at least 6 months for a new salesperson to just sink in and settle in. Whatever quotas they promised, it takes 6 months just to settle in, sink in. The person's never been to India, perhaps, even if he's been to India. Culturally, they've come from a large company. So early on, so I think what one has to be careful about, what not to do is to be sort of carried away, by a fantastic resume of a non-Indian salesperson, right? That's one. So the corollary flip side of that, what to do, is very often partnerships are an interesting way to start. So you might have an advisor, might have a business development consultant where there is no or a very low retainer, and it's really pay for performance, right? You see how it goes. You're not burning $100,000, $200,000 salary, half of that in 6 months, and then having to backtrack. So partnerships are a good way to start. The other way to also partner with other consulting firms. I think the big four are too big because they sign up so many smaller software firms. But sometimes it's a good way to start. You get to place maybe an on-site person, at the client side. They develop the confidence, and then you can start, marketing on your own. That's one way. I think another way to be very realistic and practical also is, I think in India one feels, okay, you cracked India, now you can take on the world. But what one forgets is there are already 10 or 15 or maybe 20 domestic startups in that country that are already going after the problem. So again, I think partnerships come into play where you look at what a partner is doing, look at the customer problem. So let's look at an example of coming back to recruiting again, right? The same recruiting company that has big blue chip customers in India now wants to go on and take on the HPs and the IBMs in, let's say, New York. And they might have other service providers that are offering only a niche solution. And actually, if you partner with them, they have a large sales force that you can piggyback on. So I think partnering is a very good way to start. And then once you get traction, the company gets traction, you can always look at hiring a chief sales officer down the line. Extending success in the Indian market of a product which is highly successful, whether you can just pick that and transplant it, right? Whether a transplant will work. I think again it comes back to market research or the customer research there. Even if you signed up HP in India as a customer, the same customer, let's say in Palo Alto or New York, might have different characteristics on the B2B side. On the B2C side, I think it's even more important. It's far more important where the customer is different. So customer research, surveys, just being or partnering with people in the local market who know is interesting. So let's take an example of Twitter, right? I mean, today there's lots of interest in social media. Lots of tech startups want to look at marrying social media and mobile and analytics. Let's just say, for example, right? If you look at some of the founders, the early guys at Twitter, well known to us. That was a really interesting example where they just put the product out there, right? They didn't know what the monetization model was, and they found that the usage in India and China were very different from Brazil, for example. I think in Brazil, Orkut was being used, of course, for like a MySpace kind of thing. But in Brazil, it really picked up, in other countries didn't. So I think foreign language support, I think, is a must, right? Knowing where it's important, where it's not. There are certain markets where English is the primary language, so it would not make sense to spend time on offering a foreign language support because you already speak English. But I think again, their customer research and user research is really important. So one of the best ways is to not launch before you've done a very, very thorough beta release. In B2B, pricing is can be a big advantage, right? What retails for, let's say, 100 rupees for an assessment, for example, which translates to $2, In the US, companies might be willing to spend $10 on it. So if you price just the same, you're just losing that upside, right? So doing research and just finding out what is the minimum and maximum that a customer may pay. So pricing, foreign language, and having enough of a user base to test this before you actually launch. So I would say that on the product side, getting the product right is very, very important as opposed to services where you can constantly tweak. But again, time to market is also important because I think you can't. It's like a resume. A resume is never perfect, right? Whoever you show it to is gonna have comments, right? To look at it. So I think a product is, we like to follow the 80-20 rule. If it's 80% good enough, that's good to launch. Doesn't have to be 100%.